Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, and let's talk about Genesys. So, the Genesys people just uploaded this blog post called What to Expect in the March Points Update. And I'm uploading a video about it to the second channel because I am not going to burn a first channel video slot on an update to an update. But I think there is a lot to talk about within this update that I do kind of want to go over. If you've been on Twitter at all, you've probably seen all the people you know playing Genesys, and a lot of them that aren't, talking about how this is one of the most misguided blog posts they've ever seen, and a general fear about the future of Genesys. I'm here to echo some of those sentiments and admittedly claim that a lot of them are also just total hyperbole. But I think what this blog post betrays is a philosophy that I really disagree with when it comes to banning. So I'm going to break this up into three different points. The good from here, the stuff that I don't think is actually very important in here that some people think is like the end of the world, and the bad, which I will probably spend the bulk of the time on. So let's begin with the good. First up is no hits to Maze of Muertos. They mention Gaze of Timaeus and Red Eye's Dark Dragoon. That's fine. Dragoon's 100. Making the Gaze of Timaeus 1 is fine, but also making Gaze of Timaeus 0 would also be fine because no one's going to spend everything on Red Eye's Dark Dragoon. I think the Dark Magician stuff in Maze of Muertos is probably fine if someone wants to make a cool deck that makes like Dark Magician the Dragon Knight over and over. That's a good thing, I think. Maze of Muertos, I think, is a home run for Genesys in general. They mentioned that they're not going to be hitting the pumpkin cards, which is great. I think that deck is uniquely fantastic for Genesys. It has a better version in the TCG that uses Link monsters, but we don't have access to that, and as a result, get to play like old cool cards like Call of the Haunted to make cool Xyz that just came out. Additionally, in Maze of Muertos, there is the final piece of the Magnet Warrior puzzle, which is my most hyped Genesys deck of all time. It's now doing well in the TCG, but with a Fiendsmith shell that, of course, you can't play in Genesys. So really love how that deck exists in Genesys and how the points almost justify it because it's hard to fit in, Naturia Beast and Gallant Granite and the Koakai Myru Guardians that are in the TCG build of the deck. It's nice. I like it a lot. Hits to Vision. They talk a little bit about Radiant Typhoon Vision, which has become like a premier draw spell in the format and how they intend to add points to that. That's super important in my estimation. Hits to Medius, which is great because it's the centerpiece of 3 different good decks in this format. Punk, which definitely needs more points associated with it, and a retooling of Regenesis a la Branded, because Regenesis is exceptionally splashable as an engine in decks like Vanquish Soul, but isn't really playable as its own strategy because, like, the spell Regenesis is 33 points. I don't necessarily think it's super important to be retooling with those, but I know a lot of people who are excited to play the Regenesis cards in Genesis and are upset they really can't do so without just splashing a bunch of cards that are already independently good. Let's talk about the most exciting thing in here, though, which is that for events starting in July, day 1 of the Genesys event is going to happen on Friday, with day 2 happening on Saturday, which means if you scrub out in day 1, you can then just go play the advanced event, which kicks ass, especially for duelists like me that are enfranchised in both formats, Genesys and the TCG. I'm super excited to do this at the WCQ, and that means I will actually have to spend some time learning the WCQ before the event as well. Dang, I don't like that. Let's talk about things that aren't very important. So the number one thing I heard people complaining about is this Droll and Lockbird change. So Droll and Lockbird has completely fallen off in terms of playability when it was pointed to 25. It is no longer in the format at all. I'd argue that is a good thing. But if you're the Genesys devs, you might be a little concerned about that. Pointing Droll at 25 wasn't meant to remove it from playability entirely. It was meant to give unpointed decks a decision point about if they wanted to play the best hand trap in the format at 3 copies, or maybe like suites of other hand traps that don't have the same type of flexibility. That decision was never made because 25 is way too high to ever have that conversation. So as a result, they say they're going to bring it down, but nowhere near where it was before, which is good. I think for this card, something like a 15 or a 20 does make a lot of sense. It enables decks that are straight up unpointed to maybe be rewarded with an extremely powerful hand trap without causing people to encounter it every single game, which was happening while it was at 5. The Ash change as well, I don't have too much of a problem with. I find it kind of frustrating that Ash is playable in this format. I know some people are like, it's a load-bearing card that's necessary to stop some of the top-tier threats. I don't think that's true at all. I routinely I'm shocked when it shows up, because it shows up in a deck that is obviously supposed to have points associated with it and just doesn't, and feels like, well, oh, you only get to play that because your deck's new. I imagine this is going up to 20, and that's okay with me. And finally, hits to the top decks. They mention pretty much all the top decks by name: Exosister, Cool Tune, Monarch, Dracotail, Vanquish Soul, Radiant Typhoon, and Archmage. I don't think Exosister really needs hits outside of Dimension Shifter. And I think that they are pretty open about the fact that while Cool Tune was far and away the most popular strategy, it was not very successful. They talk about how it had a 50% win rate, and I saw some people talking about how, oh, well, that's because it's hitting mirrors. I mean, yes and no. There were mirrors there, but again, I played Cool Tune and did not play a mirror in 11 rounds of Swiss. I think that the reason that it was 50% is because the deck is a rogue annihilator, and a lot of people showed up ready to stomp rogue and shocked that they played exclusively meta and found their deck kind of wanting. I think all these strategies need points associated with them, and from what I can tell, they will have them after this change. Let's talk about the bad. So this is the huge issue for me, which is sort of the philosophical underpinnings of this article. All through the article, they are extremely explicit about their reasoning for hitting cards. And over again, it comes back to the same thing: play rates. Let's talk about the standard side deck, for instance. They say DD Crow was in 60% of sideboards. Cosmic Cyclone was in 60% of sideboards. Ultimate Slayer was in 60% of sideboards, which meant Garura, Meilong, and Aggregator were in 60% of extra decks. That's too high. They talk about introducing points cost associated with those cards for that reason. Up here, their discussions of Ash Blossom and Joy Spring and Droll and Lockbird are completely informed by their play rates. Up here, they are exceptionally excited about how often Cool Tune was being played, how often Exosister was being played, etc., etc., etc. I want to be clear. I think play rate as a mechanism for assigning points to cards is one of the worst things you could do when balancing a format. At the end of the day, it's going to turn out like Farfa's last card standing, and that was meant to have a shelf life. I hope Genesys intends to continue ad infinitum. I think there are kind of two divergent paths when it comes to this format. The first is that Genesys exists as a place to show off the B-tier archetypes from new sets that otherwise wouldn't see any play, and old archetypes that have been power crept. That, I think, is the ideal form of Genesys, but requires extremely careful curation around a baseline power level. The other version of Genesys is one where the top cards are consistently being pointed and the less played cards are being depointed in an effort to ensure that cards don't show up too often in every game. I don't understand the appeal of this Genesys. Let's think about it outside of a thought experiment and examine how it would happen in reality. For instance, they talk about here hitting a card like Cosmic Cyclone. Well, we're playing Cosmic Cyclone not because it's the best card in slot, but because it's the best free card in slot. It's a convenience rather than a calculation a lot of the time. So if Cosmic Cyclone gets hit, people will still register 3 pieces of spell trap removal in their side deck. It will probably just be Twin Twister. If, as a result of Cosmic going to, say, 5, people pick up Twin Twister, and then the next adjustment rolls around, suddenly Twin Twister has a crazy play rate, and they have to nerf it to 5, bringing Cosmic back to 0 because it's not being played. Then we switch back and forth forever. We could just continue hitting cards, Cosmic at 5, Twin Twister at 5, but to get down to where there won't be a piece of spell trap destruction is going to take years, right? Like MST, Typhoon, we're going to get pretty far. As a funnier example, a significant amount of side decks started with 3 copies of Gamciel. If you ban Gamciel, they're going to play Kumongous, then Doggeran, then Radian, then Jizikuru, all the way down until we're banning like Volcanic Queen. I think this is a ridiculous way to engage with the format. Instead, I would look at a card like Cosmic Cyclone in the extra deck and say, that is a fine power level. I have no problem with duelists playing 1-for-1 removal for spell traps in their side deck frequently, right? Same with DD Crow. That's a card that's being played in the side deck, not because it's well positioned. In fact, I think that card is very poorly positioned in Genesis right now, but instead because it's free and doesn't take up precious points that are usually used in the main board. This Ultimate Slayer thing is really frustrating to me because I think Ultimate Slayer is really good for the format. But they even pay lip service to the fact that if Ultimate Slayer were banned, Dark Ruler No More would fill its slot, so they have to hit that too. There's other board wipes in the format. You're going to have to go down pretty far. They mentioned the basic Genesis rule: heavily played cards go up and less played cards go down. I just think that is a horrible foundational principle for a format. Even if everything works as intended and it keeps the format fresh and light, it means it is so hard to invest in it because new players will find themselves making these stupid menial changes every month. Oh, I guess I have to switch out my Cosmics for Twin Twister so the deck that I have from when I was a child is still playable. That sucks for there to be a constant upkeep that isn't even selling packs. It's going to TCG Player and waiting 14 days to get a 3-of that hasn't been played since 2006. The other thing that I think is really bad is that there is not a mention of the floodgates. They talk a little bit about non-engine that's performing really heavily, but they're missing a couple, aren't they? Cards like Soundproofed, Non-Fusion Area were exceptionally popular at both Proto YCSs. They talk about Cool Tune being the most popular deck, but almost all the Cool Tune lists I saw had 3 copies of Gravity Collapse in there, and I don't see Gravity Collapse named on here. Should be going to 100, right? There's not even a section where they say there are some cards that will be going to 100 because they produce these dog shit play patterns. I would like to see Dimensional Fissure hit, but I'm getting a little less, a little more worried, I guess, about the possibility of that happening. And the final thing that I think is really bad is this over-focus on the standard side deck. I talked about this a lot when it came to kind of the percentages as a mechanism for hitting stuff. But this standard side deck is like they're so frustrated that Crow, Cyclone, and Ultimate Slayer were found in so many side decks. I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, I think you have to make a significant determination about if you think those cards are okay in the format, and if you're comfortable with people going down the list of now the freest card in slot that will replace them. I think they are also missing a couple here, and I think the reason they're missing them is because if they said something like, we're going to ban this card, it would look ridiculous. GAMCL, for instance, Skullmeister was very represented in side decks because it's free. The Heralds, a significant amount of the time, were found in side decks for decks that were playing fairies out of the board. But some people were just jamming 3 Herald of Orange, 3 Herald of Green, and they're like, I'm going to draw some combination of them, right? And Lancia. Where's Lancia, you know? Are we going to ban that? So that's kind of where I land. I think that a lot of people are focused on the wrong thing, which is this Droll and Lockbird thing. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I am super excited to see changes to how Genesis is played at large-scale events. Super excited we will not be seeing a huge points update with respect to the new cards, which I think are tailor-made for Genesis, but totally, totally disappointed with the lack of information about the floodgates that are available in the format and kind of laid bare the philosophy of hitting, which sounds to me like we will be trapped in an endless cycle of de-sleeving Twin Twister for Cosmic Cyclone and back and forth while we wait for a TCG Player order to come through. That doesn't sound like something I want to play long-term, right? It feels like I'd have to constantly keep up with it and instead couldn't zone out for a couple of weeks while something's happening in my personal life and then just show back up to locals with the same strategy. You know, that's what I feel about it. That's how I'm feeling. How are you feeling? You feeling good? I don't think as a conclusion this is going to like kill Genesis or anything. I just think I would prefer a little more insight into why things are being done the way they are, what philosophy undergirds the hits, and if they have any plans for things the community are clamoring for, like Mistaken Arrest and Dimensional Fissure and shit like that. The Genesis tag on the Yu-Gi-Oh blog is actually startlingly sparse. Outside of the first couple of months when they just kept talking about it, all we've gotten is what to expect in an update. Here's the points update. This roadmap, what's coming next, was basically a stealth. Here's what's to expect in the Bipro update. these are top tables from Richmond, and then they were like, what to expect in the March points update. Remember, at the start of Genesis, we were getting developer insights about why they're ripping off Canlander and how they're helping make like old decks playable once again. Like, where did all that go? Start talking about that again. Okay, anyway, that's all. I'm just rambling. Bye-bye. Okay, see you later.